This is the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. On today's program, we're going to talk about the North American Union, Bible prophecy, trade treaties, and globalism. How do they all fit together? And most importantly, how do they fit together for you, your loved ones, and the future of America and the future of various nations around the world? We have to understand that the primary driving force behind everything you see happening in the news, the confrontations, the wars, the possible wars, the economic competition, the European Union, or whether the European Union ceases to exist, the United States of America, and whether the United States of America ceases to exist as we know it, and the push for a North American Union. So there are 10 unions that presently exist on planet Earth. The 10 unions are the European Union, the North American Union, the Asian Union, the Middle Eastern Union, and we could go throughout the various unions and you would see 10 regional global governments. Now, who came up with the idea of 10 regional global governments? And then the question really needs to be asked, where on earth does it say in our Constitution of the United States of America that we the people are supposed to be shuffled around like a game on some game deck? Where does it say in the Constitution that America is supposed to become part of a regional global government? Because that implies something very, very, very serious that most people don't know about. They don't seem to want to know about it. In fact, you try to tell them about it, most people will deny. Well, they don't deny it anymore since the election of Donald Trump. The whole issue, it used to be if you talked about trade treaties, which is what I talked about for decades, it used to be if you brought up the subject, people thought you were crazy, you were making this up. Well, I'm very thankful that the current president has raised the awareness and forced the awareness through media, forced an awareness concerning trade treaties and what they mean and what their danger is. I mean, prior to his running for president, that was like a non-issue because the media made it a non-issue, because the media is not a free media. It's a controlled media pretending to be a free media. The media is it's a game of puppets, and you can change the channels and see puppets that look slightly different, but the puppet masters control the vast majority of the puppets that is in mainstream media. And who are the puppet masters? They're the 6 globalist corporations that control this enormous media complex in the US and throughout planet Earth. And who owns those globalist corporations? A handful of globalists through interlocking directorates own them. So you have this very monolithic Orwellian Big Brother control of the media. And they didn't want you to know about trade treaties. They don't want you to know about anything. I mean, if you are criticizing the media, which is more than justified, you realize that the biggest sin of the media is not how they are biased. It's not even how they viciously attack like paid propaganda machines, selling their souls for really pennies on the dollar. I don't understand these people. I mean, I've worked with them. I was in among them to whatever degree. And I can't understand how you can sell your soul so cheaply. You get up there and you know that there are so many things going on, and you know the whole story on so many things. But you get up there day after day, night after night, playing this silly little game that it's just what you're saying that we need to be concerned about. And very cleverly, even the ones that supposedly are conservative, etc., very cleverly, if you watch very carefully, they exclude so much. Certain things are off the table. Certain things you are not allowed to talk about. And that's how they control the media. So they didn't want to talk about trade treaties. Now that they do talk about trade treaties, they spend almost zero time discussing the actual content of the trade treaties, which really isn't boring. They make it sound boring and complicated. Well, yeah, if I was to read you the entire telephone book, I don't even know if people use telephone books anymore. If I was to read you the entire telephone book, you'd be bored out of your mind. But if there was something in the telephone book that you were looking for, like, let's say we didn't have computers or something, you had to look for the phone numbers of people that you knew that you wanted to get in contact with, well, that would be important to you. In the same way, there's endless legal mumbo jumbo in the trade treaties, but if somebody explains to you what that's talking about, you are then very interested. And so within these trade treaties, if it wasn't for organizations like WikiLeaks leaking the secret, the top secret contents of the trade treaties, none of us would know what was in them. Because our elected representatives have developed this new procedure that, of course, is not in the Constitution. They vote on something without our permission, without our being allowed to know anything about it. And the constant mantra is, well, you're going to have to vote on it, or we're going to vote on it, but you're not allowed to know what's in it. What kind of rubbish is that? Where on earth did you see that in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights? That the government that is supposed to be elected by we the people, representing we the people, votes on huge pieces of legislation that will actually affect everything in your life, but they con you into believing it's just a lot of obscure legal language. No, it's not obscure legal language. It's how they sold you down the river. That's the language it really is when you see it. I happen to be looking at a WikiLeaks video clip. I don't even know how I found it. I wasn't even looking for it. Somehow it found me. And it was a summary of the trade treaty that they were trying to pass and what it really meant. And I knew a number of things about it, but I didn't know what I heard from WikiLeaks. And if it hadn't been for WikiLeaks, I wouldn't have known anything. This was a complete overhaul of our trading, of our neighborhoods, of our entire economic system on a level you wouldn't believe. If anybody told you, you wouldn't believe it anyway, because it's just so out there. You couldn't possibly think that this is what they're up to. It's on such a massive scale that most people, even including myself, it's so huge and yet so personal, it blows your mind. Because what they do with the trade treaties is they insert so many areas of great importance to you and people listening in Europe and on different continents. But the stuff that's in the trade treaty is far more than trade. It has to do with how you live personally, and it has to do with all kinds of small things. So who's behind all this? Well, it's obvious who's behind all of it. That is the primary thing you're never allowed to discuss in the mainstream media. The fact that an invisible elite controls your government and whatever government you're living in the European Union. The European Union is a dictatorship. It was intended to be a dictatorship. And the people of Europe, like in the individual nations like France, Germany, Italy, Britain, and so on and so forth, got conned into thinking it was a good deal for them. And they did it the exact same way they're attempting to do it in the United States. They incrementally signed what were supposedly harmless little trade treaties on steel and coal and stuff, and inserted sneaky language, legal language, in these various treaties. This is, by the way, according to Jean Monnet, one of the fathers of the European Union. He spilled the beans openly. He said exactly what the conspiracy was on how they brought about a European Union. They had the various governments and they got the people to agree to sign on to these seemingly harmless little trade treaties. And as they continued on the line with more trade treaties, one day, magically, the Europeans woke up. Well, hopefully, I don't even know if half of them are awake still. If only, I don't remember the percentages of Brexit, but it's an indication that you got a permanent subconscious class in Europe, people who are permanently in a subconscious mental state. And you have the same thing in America. It's not just that we have an upper class or an elite class, and then middle class and a working class. No. We have a subconscious class in America, as they do in Europe. And that is all the people in various economic groups who live in a subconscious mental state and they can't perceive anything. Otherwise, how would anybody in their right mind in Europe vote for their own demise? Well, because they're so brainwashed by the puppets in the media that they don't know how to think. They don't know what to think, so they're subconscious. We have the same problem here in America. So people eventually started to wake up, are starting to wake up in Europe, and now you're having a backlash for the first time because they passed Brexit, but you can see what they're trying to do. The people passed Brexit. The elite are trying to force you to be under it again. Oh, and they fully intend to do that. I mean, whether it's the courts or there's so many games they can play, they fully intend to put you under subjugation again to something that benefits them, if you let them get away with it. And the same thing with the other European nations. The people of Europe, the independent nations of Europe, woke up finally. Finally they woke up and realized that the European Union was, right for now, a soft dictatorship. It will go into a hard dictatorship. And you don't really have any rights to say no because you signed on to the European Union. See? So in America, we have these trade treaties that they've been passing on your behalf in America. And they too contained secret language, legal language, selling you down the river, making sure your standard of living was reduced under the pretense, and they will exploit the people as far as the people and farther than what the people will allow. But since the people don't want to know anything about anything, they're going to take advantage of it. And they will say these platitudes, these pious platitudes. And man, the subconscious class is like heroin addicted, meth addicted to these pious platitudes. There are so many millions and millions of Americans and Europeans that are just so, just feed them the words, man, and they'll surrender their lives. They actually believe with all their hearts that this new order is going to give them real social justice, true social justice. And you have these so-called leftist radicals, whatever, talking about social justice all the time. What idiots. I mean, really, I'm talking about what happened to them when they were born. Social justice. Where are the results of the social justice that was promised by so many in every socialist society, Marxist society, and communist society? Do you see social justice? No, you don't see anything in terms of social justice. You see subconscious people is what you see. Social justice. This isn't about social justice. This isn't about creating a better world in which there's no environmental pollution. I mean, you got millions of college graduates in America hypnotized and walking around blabbering about how the planet is going to be saved if we all ride our bicycles to work, and don't use electricity and on and on and on. It's just like they're out of their minds. They don't have a clue as to what's going on. Not a clue. And the other buzzwords, fair wage, all these buzzwords. Well, okay, let's start with fair wage. What happened to the fair wage? Women should get paid the same as men. Oh, really? Women should get paid the same as men. See, that if you just take those words out of context, which is what the average person does, it sounds like that's fair. That's only fair. Of course, it's only fair. Women should get paid the same as men. I have no problem with it at all. I don't think there should be a bias on how you're paid based on your sex, but of course sex is open to so many infinitely new definitions. But basically, yeah, women should get paid the same as men. But take it a little bit further than that. Take it to the place where it really is, and that is working men and women in the working class and in the middle class continue to earn less. So, I mean, kind of like think out of the shoebox a little bit. Okay, women should get paid the same as men. And let's just talk about the working class and the middle class. Women should get paid the same as men. All right. And what does that mean? Working class men are being paid less and less. Middle class men are being paid less and less. So women want to be paid the same as men. Well, look at the bigger picture. The men are making less and less. So now you'll have the woman and the man working, making less and less. See, I mean, it's a topsy-turvy, irrational world unless you understand the context of the words. Women should be paid the same as men. You have to look at the backdrop. The backdrop is huge. Everybody's making less. So What does it matter if women are making the same as men if they end up making less? But that's what's going on. And why is that happening? Again, until Trump came along and ran for president, the average American had no idea. Half of America still has no idea why the income is lower and lower. It's because the trade treaties are not just about trade treaties. The trade treaties are a legal mechanism created to enable the elite to go around the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the rights of the Europeans and people in other nations. That's the purpose of the trade treaties, so that the elite can pass their power grabs, their huge changes that affect trade, income, everything, under the name trade treaties. So, of course, they don't want people to read them. That should be self-evident, by the way. If I had something to hide from you in written form, would I want you to read it? If anybody's trying to hide something from you, and let's say it's an envelope on a desk in front of you, they're going to do everything they can to make sure you didn't notice the envelope or hide the envelope so you don't read its contents, because if you read its contents, it'll explain to you how you got ripped off big time. That's why they don't want you to read the trade treaties. If the trade treaties were fair, if the trade treaties were really about increasing the income of ordinary Americans, they wouldn't make it secret. They would proudly print it in the newspaper to tell you all the wonderful things they've done on your behalf. But no, it's obvious. The reason they don't want you to read it is because they don't want you to know how badly they've ripped you off. It is so, I mean, like, anybody should understand that. And then you have these politicians. I don't want to be partisan, so I'm going to refrain from naming one of their names, who actually got up there and blabbered on about how you have to sign it, but you can't read it. I mean, you know. So, what does this mean? It means that we're not being governed by we the people and the Constitution. It's been circumvented for many, many, many years. And they go around we the people. And the reason for a change in the economic prosperity of America overall is because your elected representatives that you elected to do one thing got in office and ended up doing the opposite. I'm talking about in both parties. Both parties. They sold you down the river. They made all these deals that benefited the elite. They got paid off big time, and they ripped you off big time. And I'm talking about, that's the real purpose of globalism. You have so many people, especially relatively recent graduates of college or universities or whatever. But I talk to people all the time with college degrees, doctorates, and everything else. And they are so brainwashed that they actually think globalism is going to create increased economic prosperity for all. I mean, you know, at what point do you choose to actually use the mind that God has given you? Let's go back to NAFTA a number of years ago. All the Republicans were behind it. Bill Clinton was behind it. The Bushes were behind it. NAFTA, CAFTA, GATT, WTO, all these World Trade Organizations, North American free trade agreements, you know, and on and on. And I remember as if it was yesterday. I remember the press conferences. Don't even ask me why. Probably it was because I was paying attention to it. I was interested. I just remember all the Republican leaders getting up there, all the Democratic leaders getting up there, and promising that these, like NAFTA, was going to be such uh, uh, a benefit to American citizens that if we didn't go on board with it, we would suffer huge losses economically. But if we did get on board with it, we would reap economic prosperity because we would be trading with all the nations. We'd be part of the global game of buying and selling. It would benefit us. Okay, so what happened? The exact opposite happened. The exact opposite of what was promised happened. The income of the middle class and the working class plummeted, okay, and the economy plummeted, and it did nothing in terms of helping us. It basically tapped us out. The income that America was making was now transferred to third world nations, and not the common people of third world nations, the dictators, the elite. The elite never got richer. Read the statistics. This whole 1% thing they only started to come up with that definition, I don't know what, 10, 15 years ago, the 1% that own all the wealth. Okay, so the thing is that it benefited them enormously, but it did not benefit the American citizens or the citizens of Europe or Australia or New Zealand or any other place. It did the opposite, okay? That's a fact. Now, that was covered up even till recently. Again, with the election of Trump, the media was forced to have at least a pseudo discussion of that economic reality, because they were hiding that too. See, when Trump ran for election, he broke through the ceiling and opened up a lot of things that most people really didn't get. And that's why he won. Because the ones who had already gotten it knew what was now possible, and the ones that just woke up knew that they had to do something quick. So the point is that all these trade treaties betrayed us and created the exact opposite, a negative economic effect. Okay? And then we can look at the European Union nations, and we see the same things. They signed on to all these trade treaties, globalism in America, and it all has had a negative effect. People are making less money. Okay? So when I talk to all these people, some of them with doctorates and many with master's degrees and college degrees and just people with no degree, and I talk to them, and the worst are the ones that have the higher levels of education. They're the worst because they're actually proud of what they don't know. And they all have told me repeatedly, well, this will be good for us. But if it's going to be good for us, how come it wasn't good for us the last time they passed this massive round of trade treaties? It was not good for us. That's what we were told. It would be good for us. So there seems to be no ability to remember what happened the last time this stuff was passed. It killed incomes in America and across the world. So one would think that people with advanced degrees in education would be able to recollect the results of what happened the last time, which were awful, and yet for some utopian reason they don't have somebody unplugged some circuitry in their brain, and they can't think through that, gee, if it didn't work, if it completely failed the last time, why would I believe that it's going to work this time? What changed? Nothing changed. You see how robotic people are? And they're very rigid and arrogant and proud of their beliefs. And they're totally wrong. If you read what we can find out, and we can find out a lot, it's all on the internet. If you read what has happened due to the trade treaties and globalism, it is creating, in a sense, a new global feudal state. You know, the king and the queen with their castle and their knights, and the rest of the people are their serfs. That's a feudal state. And so these trade treaties are intended to create a new feudal state. That you will see eventually the disappearance of the middle class, and you'll have a poor class and the elite class. It's very tragic that that's happening, because it did not have to happen. It still doesn't have to happen. So that's why Trump was elected, because at least he began to tell the truth. Now, whatever his imperfections are, he still understands what's going on. And it is because he is legitimately trying to change things. That's why they're attacking him like they've never attacked any candidate in the history of the United States of America. We have never had a candidate be assaulted by the media with, assassinations, beheading pictures of him. And it never ends. Every day there is either a repetition of some attack, no matter whether it's a complete lie or not, or every day there's some new discovery. If it's not Trump, then they look for scandal regarding Trump Jr. or Melania. It just never ends, because these people in these media organizations are completely sold out. You think they don't? You think some of them don't know the truth? A lot of them know a lot of the truth. It doesn't matter to them. As long as they get their paycheck, they will attack Trump. So Trump is being attacked precisely because he's a potential threat to their system, and they're trying to destroy him. They don't believe in playing fair. Playing fair is not even a concept that they even remotely believe. So they're using everything in their power to try to take him down. And so that's the battle we face. Now you say, well, what does it have to do with Bible prophecy? It has everything to do with Bible prophecy, because the Bible predicted this way back in ancient times. When we look at the book of Revelation, which is the primary prophetic chapter or book in the Bible, and there's numerous other books in the Bible that deal with Bible prophecy. Bible prophecy is all over the Bible, Old Testament to New Testament. But the book of Revelation is kind of a summary of end-time events. And the two things we look at when we see the book of Revelation and we go back into the book of Genesis, which is the first book in the Bible. Now, there's an enormous period, a time span between Genesis and what is occurring in the book of Revelation. And if you understand what really occurred in Genesis, then and only then can you really understand what occurred or what is occurring in the book of Revelation. And what occurred in Genesis, among many other things, was the establishment of a one world culture, a one world government, a one world religious system, and a one world economic system, which occurred in a specific place in ancient Babylon at the time of the Tower of Babel. You had the first global government, religion, and economic system. And God very, very carefully communicates to us a message in Genesis 11. He judges ancient Babylon because he knows that in the hearts of the people, they want to be like gods, and they are worshiping Lucifer, the god of this world. And so he destroys ancient Babylon by scattering them and confusing their languages. But that contains a very serious warning to mankind. Now, what is happening in our time period, and has been happening for a while, it has been put in place. I mean, the world wars were the beginning. 1918, the 1800s, this entire globalist system, they started planning once again to bring it back together with the League of Nations in 1918, which was a trial run at the United Nations. And who's the man? If there's any man who's responsible for bankrolling a lot of this stuff, it's the Rockefeller family. They bankrolled the League of Nations, they bankrolled the United Nations, and they used their enormous wealth, and it is enormous, an estimated $400 trillion to promote a one world government. The Council on Foreign Relations is dedicated to creating a one world government. That's the primary goal. The United Nations is dedicated to creating a one world government. That is globalism. And in the process of creating a one world government, you have to destroy individual nations like America. And so what do you do to accomplish that agenda? You begin to program the children and the adults. You begin to brainwash them into all the evils of being patriotic and believing in America. And you begin to brainwash them into seeing themselves as citizens of a global society, which is what I think Obama defined himself as when after he's elected, he flies to Germany and makes this speech at this very historic place. And so globalism is the agenda of the elite, because it's the elite that have the most to benefit from globalism, and it's the elite that are financing globalism. And you can look at globalism and this one world thing from any different angle you choose, and it stinks. Because any way you look at it, when you're talking about globalism or a global government, let's just look at it from an organizational level, but more importantly, a personal psychological level. What happens to people? What happens to you? What happens to the individual when they live under this global government? Do individual people flourish? Do individual people become everything that God created them to become? Is that what happens in a globalist society? The answer is no. A globalist society is intentionally designed and created from a pyramidical structure. And by the way, a pyramidical structure, or a pyramid, is a ziggurat. A ziggurat is a pyramid, a large pyramidical structure. The ancient Tower of Babel was built in a pyramidical shape. Okay? It was a ziggurat. That's the same shape that the ancient Egyptians built their pyramids in, that shape. It's the same shape that's on the back of the US dollar. It's a hierarchy. It's a top-down structure. That's why it's narrow at the top and it's wide at the bottom, because the narrow top represents society, and there's only room for the very elite at the top, and the rest live at the base, where the masses live. So that is the organizational structure of what they call the New World Order, or the One World Government. And so individuals, families, people are not important to this hierarchy. The only thing that's important is them. And everything they do is designed around that. So they structure society so that everybody is part of a slave state that serves the upper level of the pyramid. That is what Mystery Babylon is all about. Mystery Babylon is an ancient occultic and Luciferian control system that consists of what are called mystery religions, esoteric religions, and occult supernatural principles, where a hierarchy, an elite, god kings control the masses as their slaves. There's only two classes, the elite class and the slave class, which is basically the way society is structured throughout history, with the exception of the United States, which had the world's largest and greatest middle class for the majority, and it still exists, of its existence. No other nation on earth had a viable middle class. And the reason for that is that America was not designed under the same organizational structure as all the other nations on earth. That's why American exceptionalism is real. It's not a myth. America is exceptional for numerous reasons, and one of the reasons is its organizational structure. And where does its organizational structure come from? Biblical thinking, a biblical worldview, biblical Christians. You see, when they formulated the Declaration of Independence, and when they formulated the Constitution and Bill of Rights, the entire intended design for America liberated, freed the common man from this elite slavery, and allowed the common man to own his own home, to save money, to have a life, have a family, to live and not be controlled everywhere he went. And something very important produced that, which is this principle: ideas have consequences. And I want you to think about that. Ideas have consequences. So the ideas that you have, that I have, and the people all around us have, and people have in different nations, these ideas are not just some, private thing. No, the ideas that you have produce very powerful consequences. And if you believe in bad ideas, they have very negative consequences. So America was built on biblical ideas about man and freedom. It all originates from biblical thought. This is not true of the other nations of earth. It was true in the nation of Israel, especially in the Old Testament. But it is not true of most nations in the world today. And because America was built on the biblical thinking of our biblical founding fathers, it created a unique document or organizational structure called the Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, and the Constitution, which is radically different than the organizational structures of every other nation on planet Earth, including the United Nations. The United Nations is one big illusion. It's one giant con game because it pretends, it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. It pretends to be the liberator for mankind. But when you read the legal language, the ideas of which it is constructed, such as the UN rights, United Nations rights mean nothing. They mean nothing. Because the United Nations rights are based on the theories and ideas of men. And the moment men change their idea on something, they will take away your rights accordingly. You see, nobody bothers to look at the legal language of the United Nations. We have in America, and it's under serious attack, our rights were given to us by the Creator. He gave us certain inalienable rights, such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that means that the Creator God himself granted these rights to us, and therefore government is not allowed to take them away. But the UN rights are built on what man gives to us, and they can be taken away at any moment. The minute men change their mind, they're gone. And if you look at human history, the French Revolution, the communist revolutions are all examples of nations that are governed under human given rights. And in every single situation, those rights are taken away, trampled upon, and destroyed. They mean nothing because they're backed by nothing. It's very subtle, but it's all important to understand the difference between rights given to you by God and a government that's willing to protect you and to make sure that you have your rights given to God protected, versus a nation where the rights are given to you by man, and there's no guarantee that man won't change his mind at any time, including taking away your rights. And that's the fundamental difference. And that's why America, along with the fact that the Pilgrims and Puritans entered into a covenant with God, based on the covenant God made with Israel, based on Deuteronomy 28, the list of the blessings and the curses, why America has prospered up until recently. Well, what happened up until recently? America and its spirituality and its biblical belief system has been under siege, under all-out assault through media, through education, through brainwashing, through every method possible. There is multiple groups and multiple organizations that were created for the express purpose of taking out America. And that they have been very successful, and they are in the final stages. And they targeted their first enemy. This is by their own writing, by the way. This is by their own writing. They planned this in their own writing. You can research and read their plan and how they mapped out a plan to destroy America and what that plan would contain. I have that, the quotes of the men who designed it, in my book, Mass Awakening, in the first book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, and in the entirely new book, A Prophecy of the Future of America, 2016, 2017, and In the Day the Dollar Died. It's all mapped out. Oh, and the new book that you can pre-order now, Conquering the Matrix. And you can see how they planned out the destruction of America to take it out as fast as they possibly could. But they knew it would take generations. And so the four primary things that they targeted, Christianity was number one, the Christian marriage was number two, biblical moral values was number three, and destroying patriotism and a belief in America was number four. Now, it's interesting that Donald Trump ran on a platform, even though he himself is not a born-again Christian. He ran on a platform where all four of those things that are under attack, he essentially said he wouldn't attack, he would defend. And that's why he is under the greatest attack of any politician in not necessarily in human history, of American history. Why is he such a threat? Because his very presence is a challenge to the core principles of the New World Order, the globalist state. His very presence. A New World Order knows that he disagrees with the New World Order. He believes in the independent nation state called America. He believes in the Constitution and the rights and the values that our Constitution gives us. He's not one of them. People will all say, is Trump secretly part of the New World Order? Well, if he was part secretly of the New World Order, they wouldn't be attacking him, for crying out loud. And so his policies and the things he embarks on are anti-globalist. And that's why all these high-tech guys who pretend to be so hip and run around in their jeans and their running shoes and their whatever T-shirt they can find handy, worth billions of dollars. They thought they are so sold out. They are the instruments of your demise, but with a happy face. Just look at where their money comes from. Their real money. So that's the challenge. And the people who think, well, we need most people, I think that the answers to our problems will be global government. And that is such a leap in logic, because anywhere has creating a super government in terms of size and scope in any way remotely helped anybody. It never has. It's always made their lives miserable. Because it looks at you fundamentally as a number, not as an individual. It has no respect for your value as a human being. So how can an entity which has absolutely no respect for your value as an independent human being, that treats you as a number, possibly protect your rights and your dignity and your freedoms as a person? It can't. And so when the Bible talks about this beast system, the mark of the beast system, it's talking about far more than simply an economic system, although that's a huge part of it and the primary reason for it. A global economic system where people can't buy or sell without receiving the mark of the beast. But it goes back to the structure of it. And when you read, and this is very important, this is the mind-blowing truth that I discovered. I discovered it many years ago when I was involved in the New Age movement, but I didn't understand its full implications. But something in me resisted it. And then I rediscovered it when I began researching all this stuff on the pyramidal organizational structure that comes, by the way, from occult secret societies the symbol of the Illuminati is, one of the symbols of the Illuminati is the occult pyramid. And that's the symbol in the back of the US dollar. So pyramidical hierarchy structures come from the occult, which goes right back to Mystery Babylon, which was an occult system. And occult systems are always in nature Luciferian and dominate and control the masses. And Luciferian occult system always creates just two classes, the elite class and the slave class. That was true in Mystery Babylon. That is one of the primary secrets of Mystery Babylon. It is a control system for a secret occult elite to rule the masses as slaves. That's an essential part of the message encoded and hidden within Mystery Babylon. And the other part is the knowledge on how to do that. And that in modern terms, when I talk about Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World, and he talked openly about a scientific dictatorship. And when you properly have this scientific dictatorship up and running, Huxley said, the people won't even know they're slaves. They won't complain. They'll learn to love their slavery because we'll brainwash them. That is part of the deep, dark secrets of Mystery Babylon. It's been employed by many empires throughout human history, and it's employed in America and Europe today. The vast majority of the peoples do not know to what extent they're slaves and to what extent they live in a slave system. They are brainwashed into thinking that they are relatively free, and they're convinced that they're relatively happy. Well, if they're relatively happy, why is the use of antidepressants and other drugs, legal and unlegal, why is it soaring? Why is the usage increasing astronomically every year all across America, all across Europe? Why? Why this explosive increase in drugs to make you happier? Why? You can say, well, because of psychological disorders. Okay, well, where are the psychological disorders coming from? Are they biochemical? Probably they are biochemical. But they're not biochemical plucked out of thin air. In other words, let's take the ordinary person's life. If the ordinary person's life is surrounded by negative inputs, negative stressors, things that depress and make you unhappy, such as your job, such as finances, such as whatever, well, that's going to change you biologically. Your biological being is going to begin to generate certain chemicals in reaction to the stress that actually cause depression and cause anxiety and other things. So yes, it's biological, it's real, but it wouldn't be manifesting in your body if you weren't in such a toxic environment. So instead of changing the toxic environment around you, because there's not a whole lot you can do, when you take various forms of medication, you are artificially happy. Well, that's just right out of Brave New World of Aldous Huxley. You're artificially happy. They took the drug Soma. And when you're artificially happy, that combined with mass mind control, you think, well, great, this is pretty good. And you don't notice just how much things have changed. It's a dictatorship exactly as Huxley foresaw. It's a dictatorship that takes place within the mind. And if it's done properly, they don't have to have guns and militarized police and everything else. Whenever I see on television, militarized police, guns, going after ordinary people, okay, that level of response most of the time is completely unnecessary. Yeah, we do have terrorism. Yeah, I got that. But for just to have that level of military force being used against the ordinary citizen is crazy. Why is it there? Because if they were doing their job properly, they wouldn't need all that. You see, Aldous Huxley, if he was still alive, because he did advise the very highest ranking uh, departments in government and the military and the presidency and everything else. He was part of the elite of the elite in Great Britain. He would say, if you were running America the way you should be, according to his point of view, you wouldn't need militarized police. You wouldn't need these big tanks and guns and stuff. He would chastise them. He'd say, in a truly effective scientific dictatorship, you don't need these guns and militarized police because you can condition men to love their slavery, men and women to love their slavery, and they'll be happy and won't even know. See? So the fact that they have to rely on old school totalitarian methods, militarized police, heavy weaponry and stuff, is an indication that they don't have their act together in terms of a scientific dictatorship. Not that I particularly want to see advances in a scientific dictatorship. But if they were following the guidelines developed by the men who created the very idea of a scientific dictatorship, they wouldn't need all this militarized police and guns. So the question is, this is exactly what is predicted in the book of Revelation. Now that cannot be circumstantial. There's no way prophecies written thousands and thousands of years ago, long before any technology existed, could predict with such accuracy that the future would bring a one world government, one world religion, one world economic system with a mark of the beast. And when you read the whole language in Revelation 13 about the Antichrist and worshiping the image of the beast, and that you can't buy or sell without the mark of the beast, it's so obvious that it's talking about advanced technology. Occasionally you get these criticisms from people that write in that don't know what they're talking about, but they're convinced they know what they're talking about. And so I don't know who sent me this communication, when or whatever, but the big argument was that I couldn't possibly be right about the mark of the beast, being like a microchip implant or a biochip implant or whatever. I couldn't possibly be right in what I had been writing in my books, like The Day the Dollar Died, because this individual reminded me that the actual translation of the word mark means tattoo. Like in ancient Rome and stuff, women had tattoos if they were a slave. So what this person was arguing is that a tattoo would be placed on your forehead or your right arm. And it was very amusing to me. And the reason it was amusing to me is that I had just read an article that they had already come out with a tattoo, and within the layers of paint in the tattoo that could be tattooed on any human being, they have a microchip implant. They have one specifically designed to be so small that you put a tattoo in a person and that microchip implant would be embedded in the layers of paint, tattoo paint, or dye, or whatever the heck it is, ink, I don't know what it is, in the tattoo. So it basically made this person's argument irrelevant, because let's say they're correct, and that is the correct meaning for the mark. It's a tattoo. Okay, so what? How does it change anything in terms of a microchip implant if they have microchip implants that are designed to function as tattoos? So it's not even an argument worth debating about. It's completely irrelevant. You can have both a microchip implant and a tattoo because they just came out with one and it's fully viable. So the argument is irrelevant. The point is that there is a mark of the beast. It will be electronic. It will have an RFID signal or some other kind of signal. And just the other day, DARPA, the Military Defense Department for Advanced Research Projects, released all kinds of new information on their latest project regarding the creation of super soldiers and brain enhancement, et cetera, et cetera. And what the article was boldly promoting was the fact that the military had developed, DARPA in particular, had developed an entire series of microchip implants to be placed inside the human brain for the purpose of brain enhancement, making you more intelligent, smarter, making you be able to not sleep for 2 weeks and be fully productive, and giving you all kinds of like enhanced human abilities, and also the possibilities for causing people that for whatever reason can't walk or speak or whatever, they'll regain those abilities through the implantation of microchip implants or electrodes or whatever that then have a computer brain interface. So like a signal goes from the person's brain to a computer and it can receive all this enhancement. So, obviously this technology can be used to launch the mark of the beast, which will perform all kinds of functions. But what I want you to notice in terms of what kind of functions it performs, it always gets back to this pyramidal hierarchy structure, where the people on top are a secret elite and they rule and reign, and the people on the bottom are slaves. So you see, it's very important what we do and what we think in terms of the Bible. And it's extremely important that we interpret the Bible correctly. And again, back to this theme that we were talking about the other day, your understanding of Bible prophecy and what takes place and when, and how to apply that you really have to know what you're talking about, because bad ideas will bring destruction on the people of God. And so you don't apply the rules of what's happening during the 7-year tribulation period to the period that we're living in now, because you won't have any freedom if you're around or alive during the 7-year tribulation period. But that hasn't happened yet. Nobody is going around forcing you to accept the mark of the beast. You're not in the 7-year tribulation period yet. You're in a time zone before that. And so you're expected by God to know the time zone that you're in and what you're supposed to do. So all these Christians that are running around acting as if they're in the tribulation period and have no freedom and no mandates from God, it's like reading a map upside down or playing with the GPS that's not functioning right. You're not going to get to where you want to be. Nobody is forcing you to take the mark of the beast. You're not in the tribulation period. There is a window of freedom still open. God expects his people, without any shadow of a doubt, to operate according to his specific instructions regarding the Great Commission, as long as that opportunity exists. So, for example, Jesus Christ said that before he returns, he expects his people, the church, to go into all the world and preach the gospel, to make disciples of all nations, to occupy until he comes, and to bring in the last day's soul harvest. That's what he expects. Not to be running around doing nothing because, there's nothing, and saying there's nothing we can do to change Bible prophecy. Well, yeah, there is nothing you can do to change Bible prophecy. But it's expected that you interpret Bible prophecy correctly, because if you interpreted Bible prophecy correctly, you wouldn't be running around saying that there's nothing we can do to change Bible prophecy. It's an absurdity to even to say that. And that's probably the most common response I get from Christians who say, don't ask me why they say these things. I have no idea. Well, no, I have a very specific idea. But this cop out that, I can't do anything because Jesus is coming is like the exact opposite message that what Jesus is teaching us in the scriptures. He wouldn't be telling us to go into all the world to do these things if we couldn't do them, and we can do them now. And that's very important to understand, because then God expects from us to be obedient. And obedience means you obey the Lord. Okay, obedience is not, yes, Lord, I'll do it on this condition or that condition. Obedience is a relationship where you trust the Lord and you obey him. Period. Because he's God, you're not, and I'm not. So in the time zone that we're in, we should be doing everything in our power to preserve the freedoms that God has still given us. Well, he gave us enormous freedoms. They've been attacking them. But we should be using the time window at hand to obey him, to preach the gospel, win souls, make disciples of all nations, and occupy the land until he comes. But that involves, occupying the land until he comes, involves that Christians participate and be engaged in occupying whatever land you live in, such as America. And you get involved in a law-abiding, peaceful manner in what's going on in your society, both politically and spiritually. Because if you allow people to be elected into office or certain things to happen, they are going to illegally take away your rights to preach the gospel. And they will shut down any opportunity you have to use media to communicate the gospel as fast as they can. So it's a no-brainer. You're expected to defend your liberties that God gave you. Because the founding fathers, their very ideas of your liberties were formed from their biblical worldview. And where on earth the evangelical church in America has gotten this idea that they can just live in la-la land don't ask me how that happened. Well, I know how it happened. I don't want to get into it at the moment, simply because of the time constraints. But the whole point is we're supposed to be involved. We're supposed to reclaim the freedoms that God has given us. That's what occupation means. We don't sit by passively and allow the powers of darkness or any person to steal from us our rights. And that's what's been happening, stealing the rights. So that requires confrontation. Biblical confrontation is law-abiding and peaceful, but it means that you just don't sit there in a passive state while somebody's trying to take everything that God has given you. You make a decision that you're either going to obey God or disobey God. And obeying God means to occupy the land until he comes. And there are various ways of doing that. And each one of us has to be involved. Because if we aren't involved, who else is going to Who else is going to defend Christian liberties and the freedom to communicate the gospel of Jesus Christ except Christians? Notice what happens with Islam when they enter a nation. They have a plan. Believe me, they have a plan. And if you notice how they're implementing the plan around the world, it's highly strategic. They go into a nation, and then they increase their numbers as fast as they can. And that includes Muslim men marrying and impregnating non-Muslim women, and then getting them to convert to Islam. So whatever it takes, they increase their population. And then as they increase their population, they directly impact the political system on the local levels in towns and small towns too. And then nationally. And they're very aggressive about it. They are fiercely do not allow people to take away their rights. I mean, they don't allow it. And while Christians are being quiet and complacent, Islam is in the process of literally, because of their theological beliefs, their goal is to bring America and Europe under Sharia law. I mean, that's an essential part of their religion. And they're implementing it. There's communities in the United States that are, I don't know if officially or unofficially under Sharia law. There are definitely places in Europe that are officially under Sharia law. And by the way, Sharia law is in conflict with constitutional law and the principles of the Bible. I can't see how Sharia law is going to coexist with Christianity and Jesus Christ as Lord. That's not going to play out. So Christians have to be sober, be on the alert, for your adversary, the devil, goes about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Notice it says seeking whom he may devour. He doesn't have to devour everybody. But you have to be aggressive and be on the job. And so you use spiritual weapons that are mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds. You communicate the gospel of Jesus Christ. You communicate biblical truths. You transform human lives. You transform human minds by the communication of the gospel. That's what this ministry is all about. Using all the technology that God has placed in front of us and use it to communicate and equip God's people and to win souls for Jesus Christ. So we are building and completing the television studio, preparing to televise this program, which now is listened to on radio, but we intend to televise it. We intend to expand our social media outreach, create a broadcasting outreach on the internet and on certain Christian television networks to get this kind of message out to as many people as we can, as fast as we can. So with your partnership, your prayers, and you're joining with us, we can do this. And more than that, we can affect a serious change by impacting our nation. And so I'm asking you to ask the Lord what he wants you to do personally, and whatever God wants you to do, simply obey him. Ask him what to do in terms of being a prayer partner with us. Ask him what to do in terms of making donations and contributions. And when you go to the Lord in prayer, simply obey him. And the Lord blesses those that obey him, not just in that area, in any area. There's a blessing on obedience, always. The entire covenant in Deuteronomy 28, the blessings and curses, is contingent upon worshiping the true God and then obeying, knowing what God is saying and obeying what he's saying. And then God pours out his blessings accordingly. And that's why whenever, in any area of your life, when you choose to obey the Lord, you begin to walk under a blessing. When you disobey the Lord, different things happen. So I'm challenging you to recognize that, hey, this is where we are. I mean, this is really happening, but we can make a difference. And then I always hear this argument, and that's why we need to get out there and educate people through television and other mediums. I always hear this response, and I shouldn't hear this response, because people should be educated biblically so that this response, they wouldn't even ask this response. Well, are you saying we can undo Bible prophecy? And I've never even remotely implied we can undo Bible prophecy. No, we can't undo Bible prophecy that God has revealed or written about in his word. But if God hasn't written about something in his word, we can't presume certain things. Okay, right now, it's obvious that God has given us a time extension, however long, to communicate the gospel, to reach people for Jesus Christ. We don't know how long that time is. So we're to be obedient in fulfilling the Great Commission. And that is evident that we're supposed to do that. Nobody, again, is forcing you to receive the mark of the beast. So it doesn't interfere with Bible prophecy. If we were doing something that was against something specific in the Word of God, then we would be conflicting with Bible prophecy. But we're not. We're doing the things that are commanded by the Lord Jesus Christ in the Word of God. So that should be a truth that you should be in total agreement with. There's no conflict with the Word of God. It's a matter of obeying what the Lord Jesus Christ has told us to do. You can visit paulmcguire.us, that's paulmcguire.us, to send this program to somebody who needs to hear it. And you can take advantage of our book discounts, the free articles, the free YouTubes, and visit paulmcguire.us and help spread the word. Now, I want to talk about what you can do to retain your freedoms, your blessings, your opportunity, and how you can resist being pulled into this pyramidical structure. Because believe me, without you being completely aware of it, there's a constant pulling on all of us to conform and fit into this pyramidical structure. And I'm going to share with you exactly what that means. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us. This is the Paul McGuire Report. I'm Paul McGuire. The pyramidical structure that tries to pull you into this pyramid system, which goes way back to the Tower of Babel and ancient Babylon. Have you ever called a help desk here in the United States? I don't know how it works in Europe, but if you call a help desk in the United States, most often there are some companies that don't do this, but the majority of them do this. It's another reason, by the way, for why there are fewer jobs here in the United States, because companies, when the help desk companies, and by help desk, I don't mean, let's say you're calling this computer company for help on how to use your app, or you're calling some energy company about, they turned off your gas or your electricity, or you think you're calling a local, one of these big giant clothing stores or retailers in malls or whatever, or an insurance company or whatever. Most of the time you call and you get a help desk where the people are located in nations outside of the United States of America. And you know that because of the particular accent that they have, and that if you called more than one person, there would be a particular accent, and their ability to speak English is not as... It's hard to communicate with them because they can't understand what you're saying and you can't understand what they're saying. But by outsourcing the help desk department, these major U.S. corporations save a lot of money, theoretically, to give you lower costs. I'm not so sure about that, but one thing we know for sure is that if they were paying a fair wage, most likely there'd be lots of Americans that would like those jobs. Now, the other thing you'll notice is that you can often wait a long, long time on a help desk. I mean, just try calling some of the big computer software manufacturers or companies like that. And waiting an hour and a half or longer happens a lot. It happens with cell phone companies. And the whole time you're waiting, you get the same recording saying, the reason we apologize for the wait, we value you, or some garbage like that. As a customer, we're getting an unusually a large amount of calls at this moment, which is all complete lie, because that recording is played constantly. And it has nothing to do with they're getting a large amount of calls at this moment. And if they really valued you as a customer, they would hire more people to be available to actually, that you could understand, to help you. So they don't value as a customer. That's the big lie. Secondly, they're not having an unusually high call volume. They're saving their costs by making you wait. It's like when you go into the supermarket. There's a particular supermarket near where I live that I used to go to all the time. Now I try to avoid it as much as possible, because they would never have even close to the right amount of cashiers. And it was obvious to me what was going on. They weren't unusually busy. It wasn't the manager of that particular supermarket's fault. Their corporation decided that they could increase their profits by having to pay for less cashiers, or having less cashiers at any given time. And that, of course, means that the people have to wait longer in line when you're purchasing something. Whether you're spending a lot of money or a little money, you're going to wait a long period of time, because they have like very few cashiers to equal the demand of all the customers in the store. And I began to notice whenever I would go to this store, except, if it was late at night or something, that might be an exception, the lines would be unbelievable. And most of the cashier lines would be closed. And there'd be 2 or 3 at the most cashiers, usually 2. And, the lines were long on each cashier line. Every time I went in there, I could expect, a 20-minute wait. And I said, this is ridiculous. I don't have time for this. So I began going somewhere else where it was you didn't have to wait in line as much. Well, It's the same thing. Making people wait in line on a help desk for somebody to help you, or waiting in long lines in a supermarket, or whatever the time delay is in dealing with a company or a corporation and on the phone or in person or whatever, is due to most often cutting the amount of employees that they're willing to pay. So the way the game works, and I know that you all know about this anyway, but the way the game works is that they increase their profits by making you wait longer. Well, the reality is your time is money. I mean, that's really true. Your time is money. And if you were truly a valued customer, they wouldn't be stealing your money from you or your time, because the mere fact of waiting, you could have, instead of waiting there for a long period of time, you could have done something else. And so if you were working at a job and it was based on a wage that was hourly or whatever, you would be paid for doing whatever you would do. But you're not getting paid anything, and you have to stand there. So you're losing money and they're saving money. It's just not a matter of, well, they have less people or not. It's an actual calculated financial decision where they're taking from you in terms of stealing your time in order to reduce the number one area of cost for most corporations, which is the cost of employees and people. So they're stealing from you by making you wait these long periods of times on help desks or going to supermarkets. It's simply a shifting and a manipulation that you're paying for in more ways than one. Now, the point is that in a pyramidical structured society, if you were a valued customer, they wouldn't make you wait like that. If you were working with a company that only dealt, or for the most part dealt with higher income customers, okay, you'll notice that they don't make you wait. You're attended to immediately, and you get first class service. Why? Because they value those customers. Why? Because those customers spend more money and they make more money on those customers. Well, that's understandable to one degree or another. But to have an entire society structured on this pyramidical structure is reflective of the heart and soul of the culture. It's based on a Babylonian system and not a Christian system. So the idea that the elite call all the shots and the masses are expected to fall in line and be subservient like slaves is a slave system. And that's what Mystery Babylon was. It was an elite God-king system that ruled over a slave system. So when you hear all these college students and you talk about people that are into socialism or Marxism, or even people that are into the New Age and mysticism and Buddhism and Zen, or entering higher states of consciousness or whatever, they will all use terms, and it's very similar. It's very interesting how there's such an incredible similarity between the Eastern mystical religions and Buddhism and Hinduism and the teachings of Marxism and communism. I mean, they're very, very similar. And the teachings of people like H.G. Wells, one of the Fabian socialists that planned the New World Order, etc. And they have this concept, which you've heard, called the hive mind. And the hive mind is like, it's a giant system where all minds think exactly alike in order to serve like the mother bee. like in a hive of bees. And that is really Illuminati Luciferian symbolism, because Alice Bailey in The Plan, Madame Blavatsky, and others talked about this hive mind. H.G. Wells talked about the hive mind or the world brain. In Marxism, they talked about that people's individual identities have to die, and the only thing that counts is the state or the collective, and that we shouldn't think the same. We shouldn't be concerned with our own personal lives. The only thing that matters is the collective or the state. And the idea is that the state, of course, is part of this collective group mind. But in reality, the state is not part of the group mind. The state has an elite. It has a class system way above and beyond those in the common Marxist society or collective. It has a very affluent upper class. It has a billionaire class. People can become incredibly wealthy at the top of these Marxist and communist societies, which are supposed to be everything's equal. It's all about a collective. But you have these students and adults who are so brainwashed, they actually believe in Karl Marx's idea and the communist idea of a hive mind, a collective, the state. And that's very comparable to the teachings of ancient mysticism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and other occult type religions, where the goal is for you to die to yourself, to die to your individuality, to die to your ego. And it's only after you die to your ego and die to your individuality that you can become one with the universe and experience cosmic consciousness and be liberated from your karma, which is the wheel of life and death and births, until you perfect your soul, and then you discover that freedom comes when you are no longer attached to anything, non-attachment. So Buddha said that the cause of all problems, man's problems, was desire. Desire for this, desire for that. But when you learn to be dead to desire, and you can achieve a desireless state, then you are totally free. Well, that's the equivalent of kind of performing an abortion on your own heart, soul, and mind. You're killing your God-given self. And it's a total perversion of the biblical truth. Pick up your cross and follow Jesus and die to yourself. At face value, it sounds similar. But when you really delve into what the Bible is saying concerning dying to yourself, it's specifically talking about dying to your sinful self and resurrecting as a new man or woman in Christ. It's not talking about the Buddhist teaching or Eastern mystical teaching of achieving perfect nothingness. When you achieve perfect nothingness, you'll be liberated and one with the universe. I remember when I was in the New Age movement, asking myself the question, as I would read these texts and these teachings from, New Age gurus and stuff about achieving perfect nothingness, and it kept haunting me. I mean, it's almost laughable now, but it kept haunting me. Like, why would I want to continue on this spiritual path if the goal is to achieve perfect nothingness? That's like, I must be out of my mind. Because that is the last thing in the world that I would consider bliss, achieving perfect nothingness. But notice how it's almost an exact parallel to the Marxist teaching of the collective, of the state, of the groupthink. It's the exact same thing that is embedded in Common Core educational curriculum, and that is to destroy the individual, destroy competition. Because, see, in communism, you destroy competition, you destroy the individual. The only thing that counts is the group, consensus, the groupthink. But it's a total lie, because that's just a con job to get people that don't think about things to get on board with the suicidal program, because it means their own death and destruction. You brainwash them, and you obliterate their personality, their individuality, all of which is God-given and God-planned, and you obliterate it with being part of the collective, being part of the groupthink, all this Marxist thinking. And then the Marxist thinking is simply expanded on a global level, where you brainwash and indoctrinate billions of people on planet Earth to believe that they're part of this world mind, this hive mind, this collective consciousness of planet Earth, in which we will liberate the entire planet through this higher consciousness. And covertly, the United Nations and so many organizations are promoting this type of mentality. The educational systems certainly are. And you're coming up with an antichrist system where your individuality, your divine purpose from God, is obliterated like a pyramidical structure. You're on the bottom of it, like waiting on hold for one of these help desks forever. You understand how this is all integrated? It's the opposite of what God promised when he created man. It said he created man in the beginning, and then God talks about in creation, creating man in his own image, both male and female. God took the trouble to create each person as an individual, both male and female, with unique gifts and talents that are God-given. This teaching is repeated constantly throughout Scripture. He knows the number of hairs on your head, which is God's way of revealing the fact that he knows intimately every detail of your life. So he is a personal living God of the universe. He's not a collective. He's not cosmic consciousness. He's not this, groupthink. He's the infinite personal living God of the universe who chose to create a uniquely human individualistic first woman named Eve and first man named Adam. It's all about the individual. Jesus was a person. And so in God's creation, not Satan or Lucifer's, there is no pyramidical structure. Do you understand that? The pyramidical structure, no matter where and how it appears, even if it's subtly there, is an occult control system. This is never the way God's kingdom operates. Do you understand that? It is so important to grasp that. God loves your individuality. He loves you uniquely and personally. That's why the truth sets you free. Marxism is bondage. It's slavery. It's a con job. It's based on lies. You see, satanic systems are always based on lies because they emanate from the father of lies. So when they run around telling people they want to convert to socialism and Marxism or some system, they promise them we're going to have true social justice. Oh, really? So where have you ever proved historically that you've ever even remotely brought in social justice? Well, they haven't ever brought in social justice. They brought in social cruelty and domination. It's a lie. Just like when Satan said to Adam and Eve, who already had paradise, who were already the rulers, and they ruled and reigned planet Earth, and he lied to them and said God was holding out from them, and then he seduced them into deliberately disobeying God, and that activated the law of sin and death, and then they realized tragically just how blessed and how magnificent their lives really were. Did Satan ever? Think about this for a moment. When has Satan's lies ever produced the promise that people expected? Oh yeah, in the short term, Satan is a master of giving people short-term rewards. It may last a period of time. It may last an extended period of time. But when it's over, you will spend all eternity in hell. That's the truth. You won't be in the kingdom of God. You see, we have to learn how to see between the illusions and the lies. So this seduction is always calling to each one of us on so many levels. It's always reaching out and trying to pull us in. And that's why we are to be on our guard, especially mentally, and not only resist it, but understand what we're resisting. And unless you understand what you're resisting, you won't be able to resist it. That's the purpose of this ministry, is to teach people to understand, to know what's happening. Because when you know the truth, you can be set free. It's not as complicated as people want to make it. It's actually all rather simple. It's just people need help in learning it because it's being concealed from them. In fact, the fact that it's simple to understand is being concealed from them. This is Paul McGuire. You're listening to the Paul McGuire Report. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. And remember, we're able to bring you this program, and we want to reach out in stronger ways through television and enhancing our social media outreach and ministry. So visit paulmcguire.us. Stand with us as we continue in our call for reaching the world and communicating the truth of Jesus Christ. Stand with us and pray for us, and visit paulmcguire.us. We have bulk discounts on books and all kinds of free archives of radio programs and free articles and free YouTubes and all kinds of stuff that will make a difference in your life and others. God bless you. I'm Paul McGuire. Visit paulmcguire.us.